Part of me wants to hijack your Redskins theme song and just start screaming the Wesleyan fight song instead. But, Matthew, it is time to get into your beloved Washington Redskins. Do you want the mic to sing your Redskins tale?
I don't want to. I can't sing. I mean, unlike Mike Clay, I'm aware of my limitations with the vocal cords. I will say that I know that the words are, hail to the Redskins, hail victory, Braves on the warpath, fight for old DC.
Okay.
That's what it is. And there's also a different version. There's like a more politically correct version.
I know. I think you just actually sung the more diplomatic version, because I saw the.
Oh yeah, there's a couple of different versions of it, but
right.
Yeah, hail to the Redskins, hail victory, Braves on the warpath, fight for old DC.
Not gonna lie, Matthew, that was no more exciting than Mike's version of the Eagles song.
I got it right though.
That's fair.
You did have the lyrics in front of you on the screen.
I was looking at Field Yates.
But that's the value of TV, is no one would have known that if you hadn't said it.
So we have to expose that.
Just in case America wants to know. If you're wondering who has your back, it's never Stephania. Don't go into a foxhole with Stephania. Thanks.
Let's get to the Redskins because.
I wasn't looking at it. I knew it off the top of my head. I did know that. I own it. I own my stuff. I just talked about how I creeped on somebody else's beignets. Listen, there's a lot of things about me, but do I keep secrets, Stephania?
No.
Right. I share.
I'm well aware of that.
I share.
Yeah.
There was this compelling time this offseason where for a month and a half, maybe 2 months, Alex Smith had been traded to the Redskins, but it wasn't official because the new league year had not yet begun. So we pretended like Alex Smith was still a Chief. And then he became a Redskin on, I think, March 16th or so. Matthew, some people believe that the Redskins have gotten better at quarterback despite moving on from Kirk Cousins, well, I guess he moved on from them, and trading for Alex Smith. Do you believe, and I'm saying this first from an objective, real football standpoint, and then get into the fantasy ramifications, that the Redskins are better off at quarterback now than they were last year?
They certainly believe that. I mean, from I've talked with coaches, I've talked with members of the front office, I've talked with players on the team.
For his take.
Huh?
Have you asked Kirk Cousins?
I've not talked to Kirk about this particular take. My guess is that Kirk would, for the coaching staff and the players, he would wish them well.
Yep.
I think
nice diplomatic thing of you to say right there.
That's what I think Kirk would say. I think he would wish his former teammates and his former coach as well. So anyway, yeah, I mean they think they improved with Alex Smith. They're not sitting there going, "Oh, boo-hoo, we lost Kirk Cousins." They now maybe they're towing the company line. I will tell you, I think Alex Smith is a good quarterback. Just from an NFL standpoint, forget fantasy for a second. I think the guy's a good quarterback. You know, the guy has won wherever he's gone. He's been a playoff quarterback last couple of years. I think he's a good quarterback in a league where there aren't a lot of good quarterbacks.
All right, well, here's a fantasy question, Matthew.
And I think he's going to put up fantasy points. I think he's massively undervalued this year.
Okay, well, he was last year, a top 4 quarterback last season?
Correct.
Number 4 in the NFL in fantasy scoring amongst quarterbacks last season, Matthew. When you say he's being massively undervalued, does that mean that you think he's a legitimate starter? What does that mean? Because
I have him at QB 11.
Yep.
His current ADP is 16. It was at 20 or 19, and I've been pounding the drum for him now. I've been banging the drum. I spent 29 hours on ESPN television at the marathon talking up Alex Smith, and I've gotten him up to 16.
Was great during the marathon.
Huh?
Stephania was great during the marathon.
I think everyone but me was great during the marathon. There's no question about that. But the fact of the matter is he's going at number 16. The thing about Alex Smith is I think there's a high floor, right? Last 2 years, he scored at least 15 points in 60% of his starts. That's a better percentage than Russell Wilson, Philip Rivers, or Cam Newton, just to give you some comparisons here. The rushing is what obviously keeps his floor high. I will grant you, Field, that Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Kareem Hunt, better than their counterparts on the Redskins this year. Even I'm not that much of a homer. The fact of the matter is that Jay Gruden's offenses put up points. Last 3 seasons, they rank 5th in yards per play. Last 3 seasons, Alex Smith has the 5th most rushing yards by a quarterback. They're 4th in yards after the catch. He is, and you look at his air yards per target. I mean, everyone always thinks of Alex Smith as a dink and dunk guy. Last couple of years, it keeps going up every year, and obviously some of that was inflated by Tyreek Hill. But honestly, Josh Doctson, Paul Richardson, Chris Thompson, they've got some guys that are really good after the catch.
Kind of reminds me of Dallas in this regard. Even if you don't have the utmost confidence in certain players relative to where they're being to other players of their position, right? Even if you don't think the Redskins have the best receiving core or the best running back group, they'll find a way to manufacture some drives and put up some points. I think the question is this.
I mean, in a season last year where the Redskins were awful, Kirk Cousins put up fantasy points last year, Field.
He did. He put up a lot of fantasy points. He also threw the ball a ton, which helps. So, as you said, and you laid out the volume of plays, it should be at Alex Smith's favor this year. He's got a chance to remain fantasy relevant. Let's move on to Adrian.
Do you agree or disagree with me?
I've got him at 16 in my quarterback rankings. I just think there are other quarterbacks that have a higher upside this year that I have less question marks about whether they're the last year version or the previous years of their career version.
So your question on Alex Smith is about whether he peaked last year and not necessarily about the weapons?
Yeah, I know. Well, no, both. The weapons and whether or not the value is bound to come down because of how much production he got last year in terms of deep quarterback points, Tyreek Hill and others helping out in that regard. Adrian Peterson signed with the Redskins on Monday. Matthew, you, of course, were gone Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of this week. The reaction that you had to Adrian Peterson signing was? Lukewarm, at best.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because I think he brings with him a whole circus, right? I mean, he's you can't have somebody as famous and as big a name as Adrian Peterson without giving him the ball, because then he becomes a locker room headache and it becomes a whole thing. Like, I actually would have rather them sign like Orleans Darkwa, who also came in there, who came in there for a visit and honestly put up better numbers last year than Adrian Peterson did.
Was he healthy? Do we know that much?
Darkwa?
Yeah.
I don't know. I would assume he was. I assume he is, but I couldn't.
Yeah,
I couldn't speak. I mean, one of us is an injury analyst on this show, and it ain't me.
Well, thank goodness.
Yeah. Anyway, so my concern on Adrian Peterson is I just don't know if he's any good anymore. I mean, last year he had a couple of really good games, but they were against like the worst run defenses in the NFL. They were in games in which he got like tons and tons of work. Field. Since 2016, Adrian Peterson is 56th of 57 different qualified running backs in yards per carry after first contact, which was one of his calling cards. And so, and it's just one of those things. It's like I would have liked to seen sort of Rob Kelly. I felt like they needed to do something at the position. I just don't know what that is. Having said all that, so I'm not convinced Adrian Peterson necessarily has like, we'll see what he has left, I guess. Having said all that, there's a chance that he has some fantasy relevancy here, right? He could fall into the end zone. I mean, I've talked about this. This is one of those stats that I used when I was talking up Darius Geis. But the fact of the matter is that if you combine Samaje Perine and Rob Kelly into one player last year, they'd have tied for third in goal-to-go carries last year. They're a top 10 team last year in terms of goal-to-go rush percentage. And that was, again, an offense where the offensive line was brutal and they couldn't run the ball effectively at all. And yet still, when they got in close, they tried to run. I think there's a chance he could fall into the end zone 8 times, and average 3.4 yards per carry, but get enough volume where he's flex worthy in certain weeks.
Yeah, I think we had a little bit less of an optimistic outlook on our Tuesday discussion, just feeling as though like there are some hurdles to clear. Got to make the roster first of all,
right.
And more of like a RB5 at the moment, with some upside, obviously, because of what you just laid out, Matthew. But I think we are all collectively.
I have him ranked 44.
No one is that far. No one is that optimistic.
Basically, had one good game with Arizona, then got hurt last year. So we haven't seen anything since prior to October.
So I'm unenthusiastic.
So I think we all believe that Chris Thompson is the running back that you would like to roster this year from the Redskins. Though Stephania is coming off of his own major injury.
Right. I mean, he had this ankle fracture dislocation that was nasty, and it's understandable that he's still a little apprehensive. He told reporters, and this is what got kind of caught a lot of buzz in the early part of camp, was that he didn't expect to be 100% until November. So I think people thought, oh, maybe does that mean he's not going to play? No, he's going to play, but I think he was being reflective, saying, I may not be back to my normal self until I'm actually playing games for a while and getting more accustomed to how the ankle feels. So for me, all that means is he might start slow. I mean, he's still being protected in terms of the work that he's doing.
He won't be nearly as efficient. Well, he won't be as efficient, I should say, as he was last year when he averaged 1.47 points per touch, the second highest rate amongst running backs with 60-plus carries, trailing only Alvin Kamara, but he's going to be an effective back in PPR scoring. there's not a whole lot more clarity amongst the wide receivers.
My only concern, though, is a little bit of regression here. Last year, only 2 games with more than 12 touches. They want to limit his workload.
Right, which is what I said. Yeah, same thing. Some regression. Wide receivers in Washington are going to be interesting as well. There are, I'd say, 3 of note. We start with Jamison Crowder. Enters a contract year, Matthew. Does it feel like this could be the year that could he be a player that cashes in next offseason because of a monster 2018?
I think there's a chance. I think he's a nice player. Just forgetting fantasy for a little bit. I think he's a very nice player. And I think Alex Smith, if ever there was a quarterback that was perfect for Jamison Crowder, it is Alex Smith, who since 2015 completes 72.5% of his passes when targeting the slot, which is obviously where Crowder plays the majority of his snaps last year. Look, I mean, he was sort of the go-to guy last year. He comes in with the most familiarity with Jay Gruden's system. It'll be interesting to see what happens if Jordan Reed can stay healthy, because they both sort of man that middle of the field here. But I like Crowder. I am as a wide receiver 4. I haven't ranked wide receiver 33. I do think certainly PPR, I like him more than I do in standard.
We talk about the third week of the preseason being important. I think this is really important for Washington because they've been banged up a lot. Jamison Crowder has not been able to play in any of the preseason games so far. If you want to see what he and Alex Smith are doing, I think that, how they look together on the field, I think this is a good opportunity to do it.
Yeah, I think you're right. Got to get healthy first, but slot opportunities seems to be an area that Alex Smith has long thrived in his career. Josh Doctson's interesting, though. A really interesting player. When he arrived to Washington, there was a feeling as though, as a slightly older rookie, he was ready-made to contribute. Then he got banged up during his rookie season, was limited to just 2 games. Last year, he played 16 games and had an uptick in overall production, north of 500 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns. Matthew, there was probably a point where you thought he was going to be a star for this offense. Where do you feel as though Josh Doctson fits in this year?
I'm as a sleeper. Love him as a late-round flyer this year. I'm currently ranked as a wide receiver 5, so he's my number 45 wide receiver at the moment. But he was on my love list in terms of other receiving vote. He is one of my favorite late-round targets this year. Understand that he is 6'3" with a 43-inch vertical, and I know that was one of the struggles or concerns of the coaching staff last year with Kirk Cousins, is that they felt like Kirk would not just wouldn't throw jump balls. The Josh Doctson is, again, 6'3" with a 43-inch vertical, throw a jump ball. And so here's a guy who was 7th in end zone targets last year, 11 more end zone targets than any of his teammates, and he was banged up and still just sort of trying to find his way on the field. They know, and Josh knows, this is sort of a make or break year for the former first-round pick.
Right. And I was just going to follow up on your point and say that I'm hearing at least in camp, before games even got underway, that there was a lot more of exactly that type of thing, of Alex Smith throwing the ball where Josh Doctson could go up and get it. So if he's more comfortable doing that, you may see him emerge.
I didn't realize how much of a factor he was last year in the red zone, or specifically the end zone. 7th in end zone targets last season. That's a big-time number, as I know you mentioned, Matthew. That's a big number, and the company that he keeps there is, that's pretty impressive. I did not realize that stat until hearing it just now. So he's got the physical goods, as you said.
You look at the list of the people that are ahead of him: DeAndre Hopkins, Jimmy Graham, Michael Crabtree, Des Bryant, Marvin Jones, Mike Evans. I mean, those are all fantasy superstars, and then Josh Doctson.
Yep,
who's currently going, as a wide receiver 5.
From an investment standpoint, at least monetarily, there's no player the Redskins have more money invested in than Paul Richardson amongst their wide receivers. 5 years, $40 million this past offseason. Matthew, do you expect that his play and his role will be commensurate with the money he got this year?
I think probably a better NFL player than fantasy player. I think there'll be a couple of big games, some big plays. He's an interesting guy for best ball leagues, but I thought he was more important because Jay Gruden's offense, if you go back and look at the weeks when Deshaun Jackson was healthy, that's what makes that offense go. They need a wide receiver that can sort of take the top off of the defense there. They need that deep speed threat. And certainly Doctson has speed as well. But that was the idea behind Paul Richardson. That was one of the guys they targeted early. They liked him. He signed fairly quickly after free agency started. He was somebody that they were targeting quite early because of the speed and because of the need that you need for that kind of player in Gruden's offense. So I like him more for Alex Smith and for the Redskins offense and from the NFL standpoint than I do as a consistent fantasy player.
Stephania, there is always questions about Jordan Reed's health every single year because he's never played a full 16-game season. I ask you this. How do you go into the year evaluating the likelihood of Jordan Reed playing 16 games? Do you treat it as, hey, he's not currently injured, so his chance is just as likely as anybody else's? Or do we just accept the fact that this is an injury-prone player?
It's a great question. Usually we say past performance is indicative of future results. And with injury history that's as extensive as the one Jordan Reed has, you can't ignore it and just say, well, this is a fresh year. It's a fresh start. Because when you've been 5 years in the league and you've never been able to get through a full season, there is a pattern there. The variety of injuries has been all over the map. You know, he had concussion issues when he was very early in his career. He's had a number of soft tissue injuries, but he's also had some that are just unlucky from big physical contact. The bruised sternum and the first rib injury come to mind. But now I am a little concerned because he had this toe injury that he came to last year's camp with. And remember, it kept him out of all of training camp, and it supposedly nagged at him. I mean, he had other injuries that kept him out, but this thing bothered him enough that at the end of the year, he went and had surgery on it. By all accounts, he's doing very well, but he's still in recovery mode from that surgery. So he's not even entering this season with a completely clean slate. He didn't come to camp full go, do everything to be ready for week one. They are doing the right thing to prepare him for week one, but is he fully healthy with, all the injuries distinctly in the rearview mirror? Not really. So it's hard for me to feel any more secure, if you will, that he has a better chance of putting together a full season this year than he ever has. I think, the nature of his play, and he's a big physical guy. Sometimes we talked about guys like Calvin Johnson used to come down, like the way they land. It seems like Jordan Reed is one of those that when he comes down, you're like, oh, is he going to get back up again and be okay, or is he going to have an injury? So I would say you guys know this. I'm always worried about him, but those are some of the reasons why I continue to be worried this year.
All right, I think he's worth the investment.
Well, let's get a Twitter question from the masses via Keith.
Yeah, Brian wants to know, if you draft Reed, are you handcuffing with Vernon Davis, or are you drafting another starting tight end as your fantasy backup?
I think it depends on where that player is available. So, it's all about where the draft comes to me. Certainly wouldn't mind Vernon Davis, who's basically going free in drafts. But, you look at some of the ADP here for tight ends field. And at the moment, I mean, Trey Burton is going as tight end 11. Jack Doyle's going as tight end 10. I like both those guys. I mean, Doyle's going in the 11th, Burton's going in the 12th, all day, every day for those guys. Like, sure. And Njoku's going in the 12th as well. So, yeah, I mean, it depends on what starting tight end you're talking about here. I mean, George Kittle's going like in the 14th. I like him quite a bit as well.
So I think the question might be more specific to if you've already drafted Jordan Reed.
Right.
You're saying you'd rather double up with one of those players in those rounds than take Vernon Davis in the final or second to last round.
What I'm saying is it depends on sort of where you are in your league and your team construction. So you may have some risky running backs. And you're like, I need some running back depth. And in that case, instead of going with one of those players in the 10th or 11th round, I'm banking on some running backs there or some wide receivers, and then I'll just get Vernon Davis like in the 15th or something like that, or the 14th is what I'm saying. But I think again, it's just all about sort of. But I like those players too. So, and you can play a tight end as your flex. So it depends on sort of how the draft is going for you, what your roster construction is, how much risk you have at your other positions.
I certainly would like to see Jordan Reed out in the field for a full 16-game season. Local guy, has ties to Connecticut. Certainly a player that has so much upside. And he has plenty of fantasy upside. You just got to stay healthy. Stephania?
I guess my only argument here for Jordan Reed would be currently going in the 9th round as tight end 9.
Yeah.
The risk on Jordan Reed is now baked into his ADP.
It's one of the best values in drafts.
It used to be he'd be a top 2 or 3 tight end every year. And, you had to balance the risk reward because obviously we know how good he is when he is healthy. Since 2015, he's the second best tight end in fantasy in terms of points per game. When he's healthy, he produces. The question then just becomes, is he healthy? But to me, that risk is now baked into the fact that he's going in the 9th round. So I'm in on Jordan Reed this year, currently at his ADP.